Thank you very much, Odie. Thank you very much, dear distinguished members of the committee, for having invited Transgender Europe to give you a comment on the strategy and to input on your important work. As an umbrella organization working for the well-being and rights of trans people across Europe and Central Asia, we're representing 157 member organizations in 46 countries where we represent trans people, we build capacity, and we research globally on the situation of trans people. And this gives us a good view to say this strategy is more needed than ever, and we have worked very closely with the Commission in the adoption of this process, and we're very happy that it has come about, and it has been about time. However, what we're very keen on seeing now is actually the practical implementation, and Katrin already mentioned it, issues around timeline and around concrete possibilities for engagement is something that we are very looking forward to hear from the Commission. Otherwise, we see it as a very comprehensive project. It's a very comprehensive strategy with a lot of opportunities for improving the situation for trans people. And I want to focus today on particularly 2 points covered in the strategy, the one being the area of discrimination and secondly, the area of violence. This is not to disregard all the other issues, and today's rich presentations have already shown the urgency to tackle all the other areas as well, and I can only fully and wholeheartedly support what has been said so far. When it comes to discrimination, Milto's presentation reminded us, and everyone else's actually, that the situation for trans people is particularly grim in the European Union. Half of trans people have been discriminated within a year in the area, in all areas of life. We see this is particularly harsh for young people. About 68% experience discrimination, and 40% of trans women experience discrimination at work. They really feel the brim of a gender pay gap, additionally to being a woman, additionally to being trans, which is translating in worse pay and also like in worse working conditions. We also are very concerned that particularly trans people of color, black trans people with a migrant background are particularly affected, and that's why it's so important that the strategy is taking an intersectional approach, and we encourage everyone working on the implementation to consult with particularly marginalized communities in the LGBTI broader community on the implementation. When it comes to health, we also see that a quarter of trans people have been experiencing discrimination in the general healthcare settings. And during COVID, we have seen that every second trans person had their trans-specific healthcare needs not met. Trans-specific healthcare has been restricted as a result of COVID. At the same time, we see general public measures forget about trans people all too soon. Where do we stand with the legal situation in Europe? The EU law protects trans people in their gender equality legislation. So legislation that is protecting unequal treatment in the areas of employment and access to goods and services is also covering a part of the trans community. Those who are intending to, who are undergoing or who have undergone gender reassignment are actually protected against discrimination. It is great that this logic has been applied because it is speaking to the essence of anti-trans sentiments, because trans people are punished for not complying with gender expectations, with overrunning gender stereotypes, if you want. And in this sense, we're very happy that there is broad protection through EU legislation, but we're very concerned that this is only applicable to a fraction of the trans community. And this limitation to gender reassignment means, on the one hand, that we are expecting trans people first to accept sterilization, that we are requesting trans people to accept pathologization of their gender identities before we grant them discrimination protection, and that is something that is at odds with EU values. And secondly, it means in practice that the big chunk of trans people who do not identify within the gender binary, who do not say I'm a man or I'm a woman, that they fall outside of this protection. And we see that this is about 60% and more of the trans population. what we see as solution is to extend the protection to cover discrimination on grounds of gender identity and gender expression. This is not taking away protection from anyone else, but it is making sure that everyone who is targeted for being trans, for not conforming with gender stereotypes, is actually protected. Secondly, we see the EU can work and also plans to work on giving stronger recognition to legal regimes of self-determination. We very much encourage that. We would encourage the EU and the Commission to look at removing red tape when it comes to recognizing legal gender recognition decisions across borders. So if you are trans and your gender identity is recognized in one member state, it is also recognized in another. And similarly for trans families, that they are actually recognized as the parent of of their kids in one country as well as another member state. Otherwise, people feel that they are forced to come out all the time when they're crossing borders. Trans people do not cross borders for these reasons. They are living in situations where their kids do not have passports, where they have nothing but where they have nothing but a birth certificate because of the lack of proper recognition. We're very happy to see very concrete measures being put forward in the strategy because we need a structural response to a structural problem. And there, we're very keen to see very specific solutions proposed in the European Social Fund and also in the Erasmus program, because trans people have different needs, as have lesbian women have different needs from, let's say, homosexual men or bisexual men. So do not lump in everyone in one program, but make sure that the specific needs and demands are actually met. And then we think these can be really useful and fruitful programs to help trans people on the ground across the board. This on-the-ground help is also very much needed when it comes to funding. We are very happy the EU recognizes the need to make funding better accessible for civil society. We see 10 out of 25 TGEU member organizations in a survey said during COVID, they had to turn to actually provide humanitarian aid, very basic needs, as Katrin explained before already, to be food banks for trans people, for LGBT people. They don't simply have the capacity to fight also for the rights of trans people. So there we need to ensure that there is sufficient resources provided to trans civil society. This is needed more than ever because of the backlash, which we already heard this morning being talked about, where there's active and coordinated action to limit the rights of trans people. And there's also coordinated activities to split civil society, to pitch women's rights against trans rights. And we all must stand very strongly against such attempts, such false attempts telling us that giving rights to one group is limiting rights of another group. This is simply not true. No one is losing rights if trans people actually get recognition and are protected. And particularly, I want to, as a last point, come to the plan to tackle violence in the area through extending the list of Eurocrimes, as mentioned in the EU LGBTI strategy. Let's not get bogged down in legalistic debate whether trans or gender identity or something else is mentioned in the EU treaties. Let's look at what is at stake here. We're talking about EU values. And when trans people get attacked on the streets, they do so for not conforming with gender stereotypes. And these gender stereotypes actually are targeted at women to tell them this is what you can do, to really restrict them to a limited place in society. It tells men also like you have an elevated position, but there is no way to be equal with women in the hierarchical sense. So trans people actually get punished for such a strong gender divide. So we really have to if we want an EU that is based on on values, that is supporting the idea that there's equality between women and men, that there's equality between all people, we need to extend also there the list of Eurocrimes to protect against anti-trans violence, because let's not forget, this is talking about crimes. This is not taking away protection from anyone. This is a very needed harmonization across the board, across the European Union, to help us combat one of the fiercest results of anti-trans sentiments and of very outdated agenda views. For this, I would offer our help. We have a global research project documenting murders and homicides of trans people and have extensive knowledge on that. With this, I would like to come to an end. Thank you for your time, and please rest assured that we are here to further engage with this committee and with all stakeholders to make the implementation of this strategy a success.